Chapter 11 Non-Aggression and the Four Maras. All the Maras point the way to being completely awake and alive by letting go. By letting ourselves die moment after moment, at the end of each out-breath, when we wake up, we can live fully without seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, without recreating ourselves when we fall apart. On the night on which he was attained enlightenment, the Buddha sat under a tree. While he was sitting there, he was attacked by force of Mara. The story goes that they shot sword and arrows at him, and that their weapons turned into flour. What does this story mean? My understanding of it is that what we habitually regard as obstacles are not really our enemies, but rather our friends. What we call obstacles are really the way the world and our entire experience teach us where we are stuck. What may appear to be an arrow or a sword, we can actually experience as a flower. Whether we experience what happened to us as obstacle and enemy or as teacher and friend depend entirely on our perception of reality. It depends on our relationship with ourselves. The teaching tells us that obstacles occur at the outer level and at the inner level. In this context, the outer level is the sense that something or somebody has harmed us, interfering with the harmony and peace we thought was ours. Some rascal has ruined it all. This particular sense of obstacle occurs in relationship and in many other situations. We feel disappointed, harmed, confused, and attacked in a variety of ways. People have felt this way from the beginning of time. As for inner level of obstacle, perhaps nothing even really attacked us except our own confusion. Perhaps there is no solid obstacle except our own need to protect ourselves from being touched. Maybe the only enemy is that we don't like the way reality is now and therefore wish it would go away fast. But what we find as practitioners is that nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know. If we run 100 miles an hour to the other end of the continent in order to get away from the obstacle, we find the very same problem waiting for us when we arrive. It just keeps returning with new names, form, and manifestation until we learn whatever it has to teach us about where we are separating ourselves from reality, how we are pulling back instead of opening up, closing down instead of allowing ourselves to experience fully whatever we encounter, without hesitating or retreating into ourselves. Trungpa Rinpoche once asked a group of students, "What do you do when you get squeezed? What do you do when things are unbearable?" We all sat there, wondering what to say. Then he called on us one by one. We were so scared that we answered very genuinely. Almost all of us said something to the effect that we just completely fell apart, forgot about practice altogether, and become totally habitual in our reaction. Needless to say, after that we noticed very clearly what we did when we felt attacked, betrayed, or confused, when we found situation unbearable or unacceptable. We began to really notice what we did. Did we close down or did we open up? Did we feel resentful and bitter or did we soften? Did we become wiser or more stupid as a result of our pain? Did we know more about what it is to be human or did we know less? Were we more critical of our work or more generous? Were we penetrated by the arrow or did we turn them into flour? Traditional teaching on the force of Mara describe the nature of obstacle and the nature of how human beings habitually become confused and lose confidence in our basic wisdom mind. The Mara provide description of some very familiar ways in which we try to avoid what is happening. There are 4 Maras. The first Mara is called Devaputra Mara. It has to do with seeking pleasure. The second one, called Skanda Mara, has to do with how we always try to recreate ourselves, try to get some ground back, try to be who we think we are. The third Mara is called Kalasa Mara. It has to do with how we use our emotion to keep ourselves dumb or asleep. The fourth one, Yama Mara, has to do with the fear of death. The description of these 4 Maras show us 4 ways in which we, just like the Buddhas, are simply attacked. Devaputra Mara involves seeking pleasure. It works like this. When we feel embarrassed or awkward, when pain presents itself to us in any form whatsoever, we run like crazy to try to become comfortable. Any obstacle we encounter has the power to completely pull the rug out, to completely pop up the bubble of reality that we have come to regard as secure and certain. When we are treated that way, we can't stand to feel the pain, the edginess, the anxiety, the queasiness in our stomach, the heat of anger arising, the bitter taste of resentment. Therefore, we try to grab something pleasant. We react with this tragically human habit of seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain. The Devaputra Mara is a good description of how we are all addicted to avoid pain. When pain arises, we reach again and again for something that will blow it out. Maybe we drink or take drugs or just chew gum or turn on the radio. We might even use meditation to try to escape from the more awkward, unpleasant, and penetrating aspect of being alive. Someone has just shot an arrow or raised a sword, and instead of allowing it to change into flower, we run, try to escape in all kind of ways. There are, of course, endless ways of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. However, we don't have to consider seeking pleasure as obstacle. Rather, seeking pleasure is an opportunity to observe what we do in the face of pain. Instead of trying to avoid our uneasiness and off-centeredness by running away, we could begin to open our heart to the human dilemma that causes so much misery in the world. We could realize that the way to turn this Devaputra arrow into flower is to open our heart and look at how we try to escape with enormous gentleness and cruelty. We could look at how weak we are. In this way, we can discover that what seems to be ugly is in fact the source of wisdom and a way for us to reconnect with our basic wisdom mind. Skanda Mara is how we react when the rug is pulled out from under us. We feel that we have lost everything that's good. We have been thrown out of the nest. We sail through space without a clue as to what's going on to happen next. We are in no man's land. We had it all together, working nicely, when suddenly the atomic bomb dropped and shattered our world in 2 million pieces. We don't know what's going to happen next or even where we are. Then we recreate ourselves. We return the solid ground of our self-concept as quickly as possible. Trungpa Rinpoche used to call this nostalgia for samsara. Our whole world falls apart and we have been given this great opportunity. However, we don't trust our basic wisdom mind enough to let it stay like that. Our habitual reaction is to want to get ourselves back, even our anger, resentment, fear, or bewilderment. So we recreate our solid, immovable personality as if we were Michelangelo chiseling ourselves out of marble. Instead of tragedy or melodrama, this Mara is more like situation comedy. Just as we are on the verge of really understanding something, allowing our heart to truly open, just as we have the opportunity to see clearly, we put on a grouchy mask with fluffy eyebrows and a big nose. Then we refuse to laugh or let go, because we might discover who knows what. Again, this process doesn't have to be considered as an obstacle or a problem, even though it feels like an arrow or sword. If we use it as opportunity to become aware of how we try to recreate ourselves over and over again, it turns into a flower. We can allow ourselves to be inquisitive or open about what has just happened and what will happen next. Instead of struggling to regain our concept of who we are, we can touch into that mind of simply not knowing, which is basic wisdom mind. The Kalesa Mara is characterized by strong emotion. A simple feeling will arise, and instead of simply letting it be there, we panic. We begin to weave our thought into a storyline, which gives rise to bigger emotion. Instead of just sitting in some kind of openness with our uncomfortable feeling, we bring out the bellows and fan away at it. With our thoughts and emotion, we keep it inflamed, hot. We won't let it go. When everything falls apart and we feel uncertainty, disappointment, shock, embarrassment, what left is a mind that is clear, unbiased, and fresh. But we don't see that. Instead, we feel the quasiness and uncertainty of being in no man's land and enlarge the feeling and march it down the street with banners that proclaim how bad everything is. We knock on every door asking people to sign petition until there is a whole army of people who agree with us that everything is wrong. We forgot what we have learned through meditation and know to be true. When really strong emotion come up, all the doctrine and belief that we are held on the same kind of pitiful by comparison, because emotions are so much more powerful. So what began as enormous open space become a forest fire, world war, volcano erupting, a tidal wave. We use our emotion, we use them. In their essence, they are simply part of goodness of being alive. But instead of letting them be, we take them and use them to regain our ground. We use them to try to deny that in fact no one has ever known or will ever know what's happening. We use them to try to make everything secure and predictable and real again. To fool ourselves about what's really true, we could just sit where the emotional energy and let it pass. There is no particular need to spread blame and self-justification. Instead, we throw corrosion on the emotion so it will feel more real. Again, we don't have to consider this process an obstacle or a problem. If we can look at the end and see the wildness of emotion, we can not only begin to befriend and soften toward ourselves, but we can also begin to befriend all human beings and indeed all living beings. By becoming aware of how we do these silly things again and again because we don't want to dwell in the uncertainty and awkwardness and pain of not knowing, we begin to develop true compassion for ourselves and everyone else. Because we see that for ourselves and everyone else, because we see that what happened and what we react when things fall apart. That awareness is that turns the sword into a flower. It is how what is seemingly ugly and problematic and unwanted actually become our teacher. I think maybe all the Maras arise from fear of that, but Yama Mara is particularly rooted there. When we talk about a good life from the usual some sorry point of view, what we mean is that we have finally got it together. We finally feel that we are a good person, we have good quality, we are peaceful, and we don't get thrown off balance when we allow us shot at us. We are the person who know how to turn an arrow into flower. We feel so good about ourselves. We finally tie up the loose end. We are happy. We think that that's life. We think that if we just meditated enough or joke enough or ate perfect food, everything will be perfect. But from the point of view someone who is awake, that's that. Seeking security or perfection, rejoicing in feeling confirmed and whole, self-contained and comfortable is some kind of that. It doesn't have any fresh air. There's no room for something to come in and interrupt all that. We're all killing the moment by controlling our experience. Doing this, setting ourselves up for failure, because sooner or later, we are going to have an experience we can't control. Our house is going to burn down. Someone we love is going to die. We are going to find out we have cancer. A brick is going to fall out of the sky and hit us on the head. Somebody's going to spill tomato juice all over our white suit. Or we are going to arrive at our favorite restaurant and discover that no one ordered produced and 700 people are coming for lunch. The essence of life is that it's challenging. Sometimes it is sweet and sometimes it is bitter. Sometimes your body tense, sometimes it relaxed or open. Sometimes you have a headache and sometimes you feel 100% healthy. From an awakened perspective, trying to tie up all the loose ends and finally get it together is death, because it involves rejecting a lot of your basic experience. There is something aggressive about the approach to life, trying to flatten out all rough spots and imperfection into nice smooth ride. To be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to become continually thrown out of the nest. To live fully is to be always in no man's land, to experience each moment as completely new and fresh. To live is to be willing to die over and over again. From the awakened point of view, that's life. Death is wanting to hold on to what you have and to have every experience confirm you and congratulate you and make you feel completely together. So even though we say that Yama Mara is fear of death, it is actually fear of life. We want to be perfect, but we just keep seeing our imperfection, and there's no room to get away from that, no exit, nowhere to run. That is when this word turns into flower. We stick with what we see, we feel what we feel, and from that we begin to connect with our own wisdom mind. Without the Mara, would the Buddha have awakened? Would he have attained enlightenment without them? Weren't they his best friend, since they show him who he was and what was true? All the Mara point the way to being completely awake and alive by letting go, by letting ourselves die moment after moment. At the end of each out-breath, when we wake up, we can live fully without seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, without recreating ourselves when we fall apart. We can let ourselves feel our emotion as whole or cold, vibrating or smooth, instead of using our emotion to keep ourselves ignorant and down. We can give up on being perfect and experience each moment to its fullest. Trying to run away is never the answer of being fully human being. Running away from the immediacy of our experience is like preparing death to life. Looking at the arrow and sword and how we react to them, we can allow return to basic wisdom mind, rather than trying to get rid of something or buying into a dualistic sense of being attacked. We take the opportunity to see how we close down when we are squeezed. This is how we open our heart. It is how we awaken our intelligence and connect with fundamental Buddha nature.